Thank you. Thank you so much, Bradley. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are and whenever you're watching this or listening to this. We are going to be talking about something that I think it's very interesting today. We're going to be talking about spiritual depuration. So the idea of these talks that the USSF holds is to give us a little more knowledge and a little more inspiration so we can carry on with our march in this world as immortal spirits. The idea of the theme today of spiritual depuration comes from this notion, and I want you guys to sort of envision this with me, and this is where I got the inspiration to do this talk today, was a filter. So imagine this filter. Some of you may have seen a filter like this before, or those who have not perhaps can imagine what it sort of does. So the water comes full of impurities on, let's say, the top there, and gravity does its work. And as the water passes through these different layers that are made of, of sand, of pebbles, of cotton, of a bunch of different materials, each one has a specific role in purifying the water. So the word depuration, by definition, is purification of impurities. They are synonyms. The depuration process we're talking about here, and that's why I chose as the name of this talk, is to signify the process of the purification of the spirit, of the immortal spirit, as it progresses through different layers that we will see in a little bit. But the notion I wanted everyone to have, or sort of like this mental imagery, was this idea of a filter, of the water coming full of impurities, and as it goes through each layer purify of the water. It removes certain odors, it removes certain impurities and bacteria, germs, and things like that. So the water in the end comes out purified. So this is a notion I want us to have as we progress today. When we're talking about purification, depuration, cleansing, these are all synonyms that we're going to use. And in this message on the book, The Way, the Truth, and the Life, which, by the way, just a parenthesis here, I like to leave the source material for the specific slide usually on the top right corner. So I always invite people to go purchase the books, read yourselves, study for yourselves as well. This message number 18 from this book, psychographed by Chico Xavier by the Spirit Emmanuel, he's going to say that the inner world is the source of all good and bad principles, and all outward expressions have their basis there. He's talking about how our inner world is the source of all the good and the bad, meaning the impurities that come out of us with our words, our thoughts, our actions, come from the interior world, come from this inner world, which is the actual source of everything. But I wanted to put something from the Bible to go even further back for us to realize that this idea of purification, of cleansing, of, even we can even say depuration, why not, was already present in the time of Jesus in the Bible. We have this passage here that says, "Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you of double mind." This is a something that Jesus said. And the double mind here, just to explain, relates to the mind that's confused, or somebody who's doubtful in thoughts. So having sort of like a double mind, having that confusion. So he's saying, he's being very specific: wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, because there was a lot of discussion back then about washing your hands and what you could eat, what you could not eat, and all of that. So Jesus was saying we should focus way more on purifying the inner source, which is very similar to what Emmanuel is going to reinterpret centuries, almost 2,000 years after Jesus has said that. This inner cleansing, however, this is something we must realize. The depuration, the purification of the spirits, the process itself is very far from easy. It's very far from simple indeed. So it's both complex, complicated, and very, very hard. So it's something that we will learn, and as we study more the books on Spiritism, we start to realize how hard it actually is to change this inner source, to purify our hearts, much like Jesus was inviting us to do. But let's talk a little bit about spirit and matter as well, just to have some sort of distinction here. Because Emmanuel is going to say, and this is message number 13, is called What is the Flesh? He's going to say, each spiritual personality has a fluidic body. Have you never noticed that flesh is composed of condensed fluids? So he's already bridging some of the gap in knowledge that we had until then, or until the work by Kardec, when it relates to what is the spirit, what is the matter, what's the connection between those, what's the perispirit, and all those things we learn with Spiritism. He's going to say, of course, when those fluids combine, they obey the imperatives of life on earth. You have designated this process as the law of heredity. However, this combining process is passive and is not self-determining. So he's talking about the difference between spirit. He's talking about matter, and he's even going to say furthermore that the flesh is an earthly home where the spirit is in command. So there's this notion that the flesh, the material aspect, is this house that we inhabit. So let's call it the body. The body is this house that we inhabit temporarily in order for us to continue with the progress that is very much not simple, the progress and the process of purification and depuration. He's saying that we call this, this process of this combining of matter and of flesh and becoming a body of a person in which a soul will inhabit as the law of heredity. But he's saying these fluids, they obey the imperatives of life on earth. So what does that mean? That means that everything that is on earth obeys the laws that are here on earth based on the evolution of our own planet. And this is something we also learn in the Spirits book, the different categories, the 5 categories of planets. And we learn that we are one in the trials, and expiations, or trials and atonements. And as we're progressing, the more we progress, the more we advance, the less we're going to be bound by matter. And even as we progress, matter is going to be very different, because there are a lot of different types of matter that we don't know yet out there in space. So the process of purification, the process of depuration, is this process that's not easy, because we're requiring this cleansing, just like when the water comes down from the filter to purify itself. But if we go to the Spirits book, question number 96, Kardec asks, are all spirits equal, or does there exist among them a hierarchy of ranks? This is excellent, because I actually love this question, because it does touch on a very curious topic, perhaps, that we often wonder, well, are there different categories? Because if we think of everything that Jesus was and everything that Jesus did while he was here, incarnated for that brief 33 years, it's very hard to not realize that he was a very different soul than we are. I can speak for myself, at least. I don't know who's watching this, but he's a very different soul than I am, and it's very hard to realize, to not to notice how there's probably a lot of differences. So is there a rank? Is there some sort of hierarchy? That's what they're trying to ask. And the spirits are going to say, no, they are of different degrees according to the degree of purification to which they have attained. And before that, they say that, yes, there is a number, the number of such orders is unlimited, because there's nothing like a specific barrier or demarcation between the different degrees of elevation. So they're saying, yes, there is an unlimited number, but this is the qualitative aspect here. They say there are different degrees according to the degree of purification. Here's that word again, depuration, purification, cleansing. According to the degree of purification to which they have attained. Meaning, how far along they are in the process of their souls becoming purified, because we were all created simple and ignorant by our loving Father. So if we were all created simple, ignorant, if we were all created very crude, very still very much attached to the matter, very much full of impurities. There must be a process by which we purify ourselves, by which we have this process of depuration of the spirit. And if we think about the different layers, well, if the water itself is more towards the end, it's definitely more purified than if it just hit the first layer, isn't it? Same thing with the spirit. But what they're saying is, hold on, there's not the number of orders isn't limited because there's nothing like we see in the academic world where, okay, so if you do certain classes, if you get a certain grade, you're now on a different grade. There's nothing such as a hard barrier, and the degrees vary a lot, and it all depends on the degree of purification of the spirit. So then the following question, I can relate to the following question because this is the question that I had when I read number 96, the answer to 96. Is there a fixed number of order or degrees of purification among spirits? So basically they're saying, can you tell us something? Is there a specific order? Can you give us a little demarcation, perhaps, just to satiate our our curiosity? And they're going to say, the classification of spirits, we can give you one. There's the level of advancement. Based on the level of advancement, meaning the qualities they have already, or the virtues, we can even think the virtues they have already acquired, and the imperfections they still have to get rid of. So these number, or depending the order that the spirit currently is, depends on how many virtues the spirit has acquired and how many imperfections, impurities, if we put in parentheses here, they still have to get rid of. And they're going to say, but nevertheless, if we consider the general characteristic of spirits, we may reduce them to 3 principal orders or degrees. So they will satiate our curiosity. They're going to give us 3 different order or degrees. So let's see here, what are they? Let's see what these orders are and these degrees are. First, and this is in ascending order from the 3rd order, which are the imperfect spirits. That's how they qualify them as. And within this order, there's these different classes, these different categories, subcategories, we can call them. Number 10. So the higher the number, the more, the farther away from being purified, let's call it. So the higher the number, the more impure, the more simple, ignorant, full of impurities that they need to get rid of, and less virtues they have acquired, or fewer virtues they have acquired. So number 10, for instance, we have impures. We have number 9, frivolous, pseudo-wise, neutral, noisy, and boisterous. So just by looking at the 3rd order, that specific a group of spirits, we see that the impure ones are very much different than the noisy and the boisterous ones. And the idea here is that for this 3rd order, there's the predominant influence of the matter over spirit. They're going to say there's propensity to evil. There's a lot of ignorance, pride, selfishness, and all the evil passions that result from these impurities, which are led by ignorance, by pride, by selfishness. They say as well that spirits in this 3rd order, they don't have a full comprehension of God, but none of them are all thoroughly bad, because they do advance as well. They do. So if we imagine the little layers, the water is hitting the first few layers there. So that's the sort of like the 3rd order, which are also called the imperfect spirits. So again, very much there's a predominant influence of these lesser tendencies, lesser qualities. There is no clear idea of what God actually is. And this is the key point as well. There's a predominance of matter over spirit, meaning there's a lot of the influence of the matter over the spirit. And then we move to the 2nd order. So we're getting better. We're getting more purified with the process of spiritual depuration. So for this one, we have the benevolence. The name itself is already great. 5. So that's the subcategory 5. We have the learned, we have the wise, and we have the high. So the 2nd order, they're going to say they're called the good spirits. There is a more predominance of the spirit over matter. So if we think about it, starts to shift from matter having more influence over the spirit to the other way around as we progress through these categories. They say that some of them already possess scientific knowledge, others have acquired wisdom, charity, they can combine knowledge with moral excellence. They still have to undergo the discipline of trial until they have completed the work of the purification. So this is something that we must realize. These spirits from the second order, they must still undergo the process or the discipline of trials, because as we learn, trials are these things that the spirit must accept in order to continue to progress and continue to develop all its virtues. So they still need to undergo these trials, but there's way more of a predominance of spirit over matter. So we're getting more purified, we're getting better as we're advancing to the second order. And then we have the first order with only one class. So this is the first order, first and only class. That's it. There's no subdivisions there, because we said there are 10. So there are 3 orders and 10 of these classes. Five of them, and not by accident, that at least that's what we think, are in the third order. 4 are in the second, and only 1 is in the first order. And in this first order, as I put the drawing there, we can already imagine who belong to this first order. They're called the pure spirits. So they have passed through every degree of the scale of progress, and they have freed themselves. This is what the spirits are saying. They have freed themselves from all impurities of materiality. I'm going to repeat, they have already freed themselves from all the impurities of materiality. They have attained the sum of perfection of which created beings are susceptible. In other words, they have reached the pinnacle. They have reached the plenitude of the spirit, which we were all created to reach eventually. Billions and billions of years later, we'll reach that. They say that they have no longer to undergo trials or expiations. And if we think of what I mentioned of the predominance of spirit over matter and vice versa, there's a complete predominance of spirit over matter. Matter does not, in all its forms, does not have the same influence, does not bind them just as it binds and it enchains, shackles the spirits of the third order. So now that we have an idea, just out of academic, perhaps intellectual curiosity, we have an idea of the different order of the spirits, the different classes. Now we can talk about what are ways that we get purified in, because we talked about the different layers. We mentioned that there are different types of experiences that the spirit must go through in order to evolve. Emmanuel, in this book, again, the same book I brought before, this amazing book of messages, this is message number 150, called Goads. And goads, for those who are like me, not rural, I've grown up in the big cities. I actually had to research what they are, because I had an idea what they are, but I had to research it. Goads is this pointy instrument that is used to the cattle when the cattle is in the field and the cattle sort of stops. There's this pointy instruments that the farmer can sort of poke or prick the cattle, so the cattle is impelled or propelled to go forward and continue. So Emmanuel, very, very wisely, he loves this word, by the way, Goads. Joanna De Angelis, another author, also loves this word. He says in this message, Goad, he says, the evolutionary way is covered with goads. So he's saying that the evolutionary way, so the process of depuration, of spiritual purification, is covered with these pointy instruments that propel us forward. He says that according to this plan, Jesus has created the noblest stimulations for the terrestrial sphere. So the nobles, we can think of the noblest goads as well, if there is such a thing. Thus, wealth and poverty, homeliness and beauty, suffering and struggle are actually goads or opportunities implemented by Christ for the benefit of humankind. Emmanuel is going from the knowledge here that Christ is the one that's governing our planet. That spirit is in charge of planet Earth. And he's saying that there are these goals, these different layers. Remember the filter? Remember the filter? That these different layers that we will go through, and we have to go through them. When we have different trials, we can come in an incarnation with, let's say, beauty and wealth, and in the other one with poverty and homeliness. And we're going to learn different things. We have to learn different virtues from these different experiences. And oftentimes these experiences are these goals that we sort of slow down our own march of progress. And then the spirits come and they say, like, you have to face this now. So why don't we do it? And then they help us, and it's almost like propelling us forward. So there is this blessed opportunity, Emmanuel is saying, that we have to understand, and we have to enjoy and actually embrace as we're going through these goals. He's going to continue in this message by saying, God gives himself to the children of his entire creation, sharing with all of them the treasures of his infinite love, stimulating them to evolve by means of 1,000 different ways, stimulating us to evolve by means of 1,000 different goals, 1,000 different ways, 1,000 different means and forms that we can actually evolve, that we can actually continue in the law of progress, which is a law that is, we'll see, it's unstoppable, immutable. We can progress faster or slower, but we're always progressing, because if we don't, what happened is much like with the cattle that doesn't want to continue with the work of the field. There's going to be something coming and pricking us there, and it's going to be our goals. He says, still there are many spheres like Earth where the inhabitants have not yet grasped these glorious realities, and so they halt their own progress, slumbering on the bed of illusion. So he's saying we halt our own progress, and what happens here comes the goads, and whenever that happens, and we're like, oh, what was this? I was not expecting this, this downfall. I was not expecting this disease. I was not expecting this grave condition. I was not expecting one thing or another, that in the end all serve to propel us forward. Whenever we have halted in our own spiritual progress, these goads come and prick us, and we actually move forward. So Emmanuel invites us in this message to realize how God is infinitely good and just and fair and loving, and we all receive these opportunities. He says, examine your life, identify your goals. So identify these things that are sort of propelling you forward, and he says, and do not rebel against them. That's his final message. Examine your life, identify your goals. So there's a lot of courage behind examining our own lives, identifying our own goals. What are these things that are maybe propelling me forward, that even though I don't want to go, I'm lazy, or I'm still full of pride and selfishness? What are these goals? But he says, do not rebel against them. And this is something very important, because in this process of spiritual depuration, we often rebel against the next layer. We often rebel against these things that we have to go through in order to acquire the virtues we must acquire as we're passing through the different classes and the different orders. And in the book Heaven and Earth, Between Heaven and Earth, this one is a book by Chico Xavier, psychographed by Chico. This is by the spirit André Luis. There's these two characters there, these two people who are there, and they're talking about this woman called Blandina. She's telling Hilario and André, who is the author. She says that evolution, competence, personal growth, and sublimation are the result of constant toil. The more knowledge we possess, the more active we are. Idleness keeps our mental energies focused on the lowest planes of life. Toil, she says, is a blessing. She says the education may not be a condition for our happiness, but it is crucial for our soul's evolution. So education sometimes, when we're trying to correct mistakes, when we're trying to purify ourselves, get rid of those lower tendencies, those lower qualities rooted in pride and selfishness, education may not be a condition for our happiness, meaning sometimes it hurts. Sometimes the process of education is very bitter, almost like taking a medicine that we know we must take, but we hate the process of taking it, or an injection, or anything that causes us discomfort and pain. And education oftentimes is that. But she's saying here that all these things are the result of constant toil. And the more knowledge we possess, the more active we are, of course. Of course. This is beautiful to imagine because, again, let's realize the fact that we have now Spiritism, for instance. We have all these knowledge of our current condition, meaning in Bezerra de Menezes, who was a doctor and Spiritist from Brazil, he used to say that Spiritism, and I love this, he says Spiritism helps us understand who we are or what we are, immortal souls, how we are, meaning what form we are right now, the things we are, our conditions here, and where we're going. So these three things: what/who we are, how we are, and where we're going. Now that we have that knowledge, the more active we become. The more active we become in exercising charity, because outside of charity, there's no salvation. We also learn that. The more active we are in trying to shape our own selves and diminish our tendencies, our lower tendencies, our tendencies for the evil action still. Because we know that every action, there's going to be an equal reaction back to us. So if we do something bad, we're going to have something that happens to us in return, because the world marches towards order and equilibrium and balance. So we understand these things, and with the more knowledge we have, she's saying here, the more active we are in progressing ourselves and progressing those around us, because we all depend on one another. And this is what is so beautiful about possessing more knowledge and starting to understand that there's still so much that we don't know. But with the little that we already know, we can already effect change, both within and outside of us as well. Idleness is the opposite of that. She says it keeps our mental energies focused on the lowest planes of life. Toil, therefore, is a blessing. We're not going to go through all the different layers of the spiritual filter that I asked you guys to maintain in your heads, in your minds, by staying idle. We're not going to do that. We have to work. We have to progress. We have to put our knowledge into practice. And one of my favorite authors of all time, Leon Denis, in this book, The Problem of Life and Destiny, he says that freedom or liberty is a necessary condition of the human soul, which without it could not construct its destiny. So he's saying that freedom or liberty, he's talking about free will, which is a very big topic in the Spiritist movement as well. Free will is a necessary condition of the human soul, because we must progress, in the things that we acquire, the good ones, we acquire through our effort, because we chose to do so. That's what free will is, because we chose to do so. We chose to construct our destiny, and we want to construct a good one, but we must work for that. So he says as well, therefore, let us rise to the conscience of our true role and goal, and we will be free. He says, instead of forming passive beings under the yoke of matter and prey to uncertainty and inertia, he says, instead of that, let us fashion truly free souls, freed from the chains of fate. The only determinism that Spiritism preaches or has is the idea that we are marching towards plenitude. That's the only determinism that there is, that we will one day be in that first order. Like I said, billions and billions of years, but we will get there. That's the only deterministic thing that we talk about. Everything else depends on us. How fast we go, what sort of pathway we take, it's going to depend on us. What world we're going to inhabit, it's all going to depend on how we use this instrument, this very important instrument of free will. Now, as we move on now, we have this book called The Good News. This one is by Humberto de Campos, and this is psychographed by Chico. When we're talking about the purification, we have to think of, obviously, the layers. We have to think of different reincarnations. And Humberto is going to say the body is just a garment, and all material garments eventually become tattered. But as God's children, human beings will always find in his love the elements they need to change the garment. We will always find the elements because God loves us. We will always find what we need to continue to progress. The death of the body is that essential change because the soul will continue to journey through other experiences until it receives enough light for the final pathway into the kingdom of God with all the perfection it has achieved on the rough roads it has traveled. Definitely rough roads. We have come from rough roads. We are in a rough road, and we'll still be in a rough road for a little bit because we're still very much attached to the matter. We're still very much in a planet that's far from being a blessed one or a pure one, full of pure spirits. Very, very far. So the roads ahead are going to be rough, but the thing is, we are progressing. We are marching towards that. Sometimes, these roads can seem unfair, but if we consider the idea of a fair and just and infinite and perfect in all its qualities, a God that is all those things, we cannot imagine that we would have an unfair voyage ahead of us, that the rough road we have ahead of us is something we don't deserve. When we stop with that sort of victim mentality, we free ourselves from the shackles and we can move forward and we can understand and not just stay idle. We can understand and apply the knowledge that we are acquiring. We do find all the elements we need to change our garment. And just like he's saying, the body, everything that's material here is going to go to dust. It's going to become dust again. Came from the dust, it's going to go back to dust. But the notion here too, when we're talking reincarnations and now bringing the idea of the future, we can imagine here, and this is just merely, let's say, for demonstration purposes, okay? This is not necessarily goes all the way like that, except for this first one. So let's imagine that the very dirty water that we have there, almost like with mud and impurities. That's how our spirits are in the beginning, simple and ignorant and full of pride and selfishness and animalistic tendencies and all those things like that. So as we go through this process, we're going to find different garments, as we just saw in the previous slide. We're going to inhabit different bodies. We're going to even inhabit different types of worlds as we're going through that. But just to bring to our own world here, let's imagine we're born simple and ignorant. We go from a primitive world to the world that we're in right now, and we all of a sudden one of our layers is slavery. So we must learn all those things by going through a very, very sad process of slavery. After that, we reincarnate as royalty to acquire other virtues, to purify ourselves from other things. And then we go through, let's say, in the other reincarnation, a fatal disease, or we suffer a lot with our health. And then we come back again. Now we're in poverty, and now we have power, so forth and so on, until we reach the process and we are purified. Once again, this is overly simplistic, but just I wanted to give an idea and sort of like an imagery for us to realize what spiritual depuration actually is. What is this purification of the spirit that is immortal? And it's going to go through a lot of those things. Again, this is overly simplified, and it doesn't necessarily go obviously in that order, but just as an example, as we can see, there are different things to be worked on and learned from those different layers that I put there: slavery, royalty, poverty, disease, power, wealth, etc., etc., etc. and we understand that the more complex our world is going to be, the more we advance, just like with school, the harder it's going to be the lesson as well. But we can definitely undertake them, because again, God is fair and just and kind and loving and perfect. So there's always fairness involved in that. And as we go through these different layers, there's also this idea of suffering, because to purify oneself, as Emmanuel said all the way in the beginning, is not very simple. It's actually very, very hard. So in this book, also by Emmanuel, this is a different book, psychographed by Chico Xavier. This one's called Living Spring. There are a few messages from talking about suffering and this idea of suffering in our own purification. So I didn't want to just bring one, so I brought a little glimpse of three here. Number 61 says, as long as you're living on a plane of practice, trials and atonement, as the earth, you will continue to be confronted with problems and suffering. Number 141 says, each day has a lesson for us. Each experience leaves behind its corresponding value. Each problem entails a determined objective. Everything has a lesson. Each experience has something that we can learn from. Each problem has an objective. And suffering, a lot of the times, is a very tough experience. Remember, we talked about rough roads? That's what it is. Let us remember that the inner man continues to be renewed, purified. The struggle enriches it with experience. Pain purifies its emotions, and sacrifice tempers its character. So pain purifies the emotions. There's nothing like pain to humble us, for instance. When we see how much we need others, when we see how much we have not been grateful for our health or for our condition, whatever that may be, pain comes and humbles us. Diseases, just as we have had with the pandemic, didn't matter the color of your skin, your wealth status, what culture you were part of. We're all leveled. So there are these things that very much help us in this process of the purification. And even says there, sacrifice temper its characters. It's when we learn through sacrifice, we're tempering our characters. And if we imagine, or if we envision all the high spirits, all the good spirits that cross this earth here, I invite you to think of one that did not have to sacrifice a lot. You're not going to find. I'm going to give you the answer already. All of those had to sacrifice a lot. All of the good spirits that we saw here, all of those that became saints, all of those that are paragons of humility and charity, they had to sacrifice a lot. In the book Plenitude now, this is a different author, the one already mentioned, Joanna De Angelis. This one is psychographed by Divaldo. She says, suffering is a path to spiritual redemption in the face of the incomplete moral development of the individual. A personal choice, it is a script devoid of any punitive action. So it's not to it's not to punish us. That's what it is. We don't realize that. We think we're being punished by an unfair God when it's not true. She says it is a script devoid of any punitive action, educating, which is hard, or re-educating through the same mechanisms, thanks to which there was compromise, deviation from the route, disrespect for the laws of life. Its presence prevails while depuration is necessary. Here's that word again, depuration is necessary. So there's this idea that sometimes we have to go through the same mechanisms. So if we come with, let's say, we reincarnate with a lot of wealth and power, and we misuse that, rest assured that we're going to have to come again with that, and we're going to have to learn to use it wisely and use it in favor of others. So we're going to have to educate or re-educate through the same mechanisms oftentimes. So if we imagine the filter again, we have pain, as we're learning that pain is very much something that is part of this process of the purification of the spirit. I brought here a little cartoon or a little depiction of things that we can do with pain, and they almost follow a sequence. Let's imagine that pain is that little boulder there, rough, hard, very, very difficult to withstand. So we can suffer from pain. We can just drag our pain. We can analyze our pain. So it's already getting a little bit better. We can learn from our pain. We can accept our pain, and accepting does not mean just passive acceptance and idleness. Absolutely not. This is a lot to do with resignation. So we can resign. We can accept our pain. So that's the person accepting that the boulder is there, or we can transform it. And I love that little heart that the person, little person there carved from the pain, the big boulder of pain. They carved a little heart from that. So this is something that we must realize as we're going through painful situations, that we can do all these things. So my question, and each person maybe can answer among themselves or internally, what are we doing with our pain? Where are we there? Well, pain is a blessing sent by God to all his elected. We have this one in the gospel according to Spiritism. So when you suffer, do not allow yourself to become afflicted. Rather bless the Omnipotent who, through the pain of this world, has chosen you to receive glory in heaven. Wow. I can't speak for myself, but I'd say, if I had to generalize, I'd say we're very far from this full acceptance and resignation that whenever we're visited by pain, our first reaction is to just thank God for it. It's not there. It's a process. We'll get there, but I think it's a process. But realizing that if we have the pain now, we are in a process of purification and we're marching forward. So we're already shifting the lens through which we see pain and we see suffering, just like the Apostle Paul. And I love something that he used to say, or he used to think whenever he was in great pain, and he was in great pain, as we see in the book Paul and Stephen, for instance, by the Spirit Emmanuel, psychographed by Chief Xavier. He was in a lot of pain. He suffered a lot. And then any time that he would be suffering, he would be thanking Jesus for believing that he was worthy of those difficult trials. Because if we realize that God is just, fair, loving, all those things I already mentioned 300 times today, we will realize that if we're receiving something, means we can and we should be able to withstand it. So that's something for us to realize. So pain is a blessing, therefore, because it means that we're going through that process of purification. And when we go to the Spirit's book, question 919, what is the most efficacious method of ensuring one's own moral improvement in the present life and resisting the attraction of evil? And they're going to say, one of the sages of antiquity has told you, know thyself. That's it. That's the most efficacious way. So when we know ourselves, we know we can kind of gather perhaps the layer we're in. We can start to understand the layers of the filter that we're in, the spiritual filter. And we can understand that this is part of a process. This is part of something we must go through. But we must know ourselves, because each of us has had a unique journey. We're on the same boat here on earth, but we had a unique journey, and we each have already acquired some virtues here and there, and we still have a lot of impurities to get rid of, but it's very unique to each one of us. So knowing ourselves, knowing what type of pride and selfishness I'm still watering those plants, I'm still watering those plants of pride and selfishness in my heart, is very important for us to move forward. And in the book Action and Reaction, and this one I think was a beautiful thing that Silas said. He said, whenever our pain doesn't cause new pain, and whenever our affliction doesn't cause affliction in those around us, our debt is in the process of expiring. Wow. That is a very good measure to see how much we are in the process of not having that debt anymore. Because a lot of the pain we suffer, a lot of the pain we have to withstand are because of things that we did wrong in the past life as well. So whenever that pain doesn't cause more pain, or affliction doesn't cause affliction in those around us, means that pain is in the process, or that debt is in the process of expiring. That is very deep and very beautiful. That's why I wanted to bring and share this with you guys today. The gospel according to Spiritism, we're going to learn that progress is a law of nature. All beings of creation, be they animated or not, have been submitted to this law through the bounty of God, who wishes everything to be exalted and prosper. So progress is a law of nature. Progress is something that we're not going back. we go forward. We can halt our progress by doing a lot of wrong things, and we'll suffer those consequences. But progress is a law of nature. Even actual destruction, look at what their spirits are going to say, which appears to men to be the end of everything, is only a means of reaching a more perfect state through transformation, seeing that everything that dies only to be reborn again, suffering no consequences from the annihilation. So even destruction that we oftentimes think, we oftentimes think, oh, this is it, this is the end, this is terrible, we're back to square one, and we're marching backwards, and all those things. And that's why they're saying, which appears to men to be the end of everything, is only a means of reaching another state. It's a means of transformation. It's a means of purification in this process of spiritual depuration. But we don't achieve all those things only in one place. So that's why we have that famous saying in John, in my Father's house are many mansions, or there are many mansions, or many rooms, depending on the translation, in my Father's home. The home of the house of the Father is the universe. The different mansions are the worlds which circulate in infinite space and offer the spirits who incarnate on them dwelling places which correspond to their progress. So the idea is that in my Father's house are many mansions relates to the notion that which is one of the pillars of Spiritism, this idea that there are different stations of progress, different planets that we go through as we progress as spirits, different stations for us to gather all the necessary elements we need to gather in order to progress. And those elements are very much in accordance with our own degree of evolution. And they're going to say, conforming to whether the soul is more or less purified and detached from material lies, the ambient in which it finds itself will vary infinitely. There are so many different categories of world. There's so many different worlds. Think about everything we don't know about space and the universe yet. There is so much more that we don't know yet than the things that we actually know. It's tremendous. The difference is tremendous. We can barely fathom the actual difference between what we know and what we don't know. So there's this notion, therefore, that these many mansions, the spirits who are going through those different layers, can go through those different layers in different worlds as well, as they progress from simple and ignorant through the process of purification and getting all the way to being purified spirits of the first order and only class. And we saw this, we can, if those who want to learn more about this can read it in the book, on the way to the light, I think that's the name of the book, by Chico Xavier and Emmanuel, about those who reincarnated from Capella, the Capella constellation. And these are spirits who couldn't progress anymore in the place that they were, so they were brought here to earth. In the book Our Daily Bread, says Christ began his divine mission among peasants. He lived among irascible doctors of the law and rebellious sinners. He associated with the sick and the afflicted. He ate the hard bread of the humble fisherman and finished up his holy work between two thieves. And this is what Emmanuel, the title of this message is Think a Little. Basically saying, think a little bit. Stop and realize what Christ did and how he was and how he did it. And he's listing all these things that went wrong. And he says, think a little. What are you hoping for? If you are waiting, this is what Emmanuel is saying, if you are waiting for an easy life and situations of prominence in the world, remember the Master and think a little. If we are waiting for perfection, for all the stars to align, for me to be feeling the best version I've ever felt, the best version of myself, to do change, to make something different, to improve myself, to help others. If I'm waiting for that, I'm never going to do anything. I'm going to be halting my own progress and the progress of those around me. So Emmanuel here is saying, think a little. Look at everything the Master went through, and what are you hoping for? You being a spirit that is way, way, way less than what our master, what Jesus actually is. So, what about us? This is the final question I have for us here. When we're thinking about the process of spiritual depuration, how are we going through this process of purifying ourselves from our impurities? Are we really trying to transform our pain? Are we really rebelling against the goals that are trying to propel us forward? Are we really using the knowledge that we have at our disposal to help ourselves and help those around us? Are we really cultivating all the virtues? Are we going through the trials with patience, humility, resignation, love, understanding, with a charitable heart and with a faithful spirit? Are we going through those trials like that? We must understand that it's all part of a process, but it's pretty much up to us to go slow or to go fast. And with that, I wish everybody a very, very blessed week.
Thank you so very much, Yuri Castro, for very deep and wonderful insights and reflections that you provided us today. Everyone, please stay with us for the Q&A session, which will start shortly after these few but very important announcements. The 19th U.S. Spiritist Symposium, which is occurring on September 20th of this year in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Save the date and join us to reflect on the evolution of consciousness, a path towards enlightenment. There will be activities for kids and teens all day. Next, be certain to check out the continuing podcast-like series, Psychology and Spirituality, A Bridge to a Better Life, based on the works by Joanna Giangelis. There's a new episode appears every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The podcast-like series is available on YouTube and Spotify. There's also the Spiritist Review 1865 by Allan Kardec, which has been recently published. It is available at the spiritistbooks.us bookstore. And be certain to check out the wonderful, wonderful Spiritist app, Be My Hope, available from the App Store and Google Play. This app offers uplifting content and a collection of videos, daily messages, and audio materials. Be certain to download it today. And there is available 7 free professionally recorded Spiritist audiobooks, sponsored and produced by the Spiritist Society of the Carolinas. At your own pace, you can listen to Allan Kardec's foundational works on YouTube at Spiritist Society Carolinas. And please notice on the screen, there is a QR code. If you want to help the USSF produce more publications and promote Spiritism to everyone, scan the QR code on screen for your donation. Now, let's turn our attention to your comments and questions. There's still time to send in yours, so please feel free to share your thoughts. From the United States Spiritist Federation, is the degree of our purification reflected in the energy we emit?
Short answer, yes. Long answer means everything that we emit, everything we can gather as well, has to do with how we are aligning ourselves with the higher spirits. What sort of thoughts are we cultivating? So it all goes back to the inner world that Emmanuel was saying. It's so important in the inner cleansing, this inner transformation, the transformation of our inner world. And of course, we're energy, we're matter, we vibrate with others and for others. So yes, if we can think about the spirits, like for instance, Joanna de Angelis, who was the mentor of Divaldo, the late and great Divaldo Franco, he used to say that whenever she was around, there was this the smell of rose, like not rose, but a smell of a type of flower. I forgot which type, but there was a smell of flower in the air. That was like her energy emitting sort of that thing that even created a specific pleasant smell. So yes, everything is related to the sort of the energy we're reflecting, and the more purified we are, or the more purified we become, the better that's going to be.
Okay, thank you, Yuri. And from TVCEI, International Spiritist Council, what is the role of forgiveness on our depuration process?
Amazing question. Okay. The role of forgiveness. Forgiveness ties itself back to charity, and outside of charity there's no salvation. So if we think about forgiveness, anytime I think of forgiveness, I think of two types: forgiveness towards others. So if we think of charity as how Jesus understood it, benevolence with everyone, indulgence with people's flaws and their mistakes, and forgiveness for those who err against us, basically, in those words. So the idea here is that, yes, forgiveness has a big role, because we have to forgive ourselves for our mistakes and understand that we are in the process of depuration. We're far from being purified. So we will make mistakes. We have made mistakes, and sorry to tell this to anybody, but you will continue to make mistakes as you go in this walk of progress. So forgiveness becomes the key that frees us from this prison that we put ourselves in. So we can free ourselves when we're starting to practice the forgiveness for ourselves, so all the self-forgiveness, and the forgiveness for others, understanding that others are also in their own very individual, very unique process of depuration. They will also make mistakes. So when we have that sort of look, we're practicing charity, and we're forgiving with more aptitude, I would say, whenever we're realizing that. So having that knowledge helps us forgive, I think.
This is helpful. Thank you. From the U.S. Spiritist Federation, might we be wise or learned at times, yet still have some impurities?
So the idea of the categories or the orders, yes. The short answer, yes. The long answer is, if we remember, there are 3 orders. So there's 5 classes in one, 4 in the other, which the 2 that are mentioned in the question there are 2 from the second order. And there's the first order. The first order is the one they call pure spirits. There's only one order there. The wise and learned are part of the second order, which are the good spirits. So we can imagine that it's almost like they're midway through the ends of the filter of the depuration process. So there are still things they must go. And even in the Spirit's book, we learn that they still have to undergo the process of trials. Why is that? Let's think. If they have to undergo the process of trial, it means they have to learn something, some of the virtues, or improve the virtues they already have, and get rid of some of the impurities and some of the things they still need to put behind them so they can advance even further.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thank you. From TVCEI, International Spiritist Council, what does it mean in practice to balance love for oneself, for our neighbor, and to God?
In practice, I would say it means to have a very balanced, and I think there's says there, to balance love. If we try to go too much in one direction, so let's say I'm going too strong on self-love and I'm forgetting my neighbor, that's not the way to go as well. Or if I'm only focusing on everyone else while I'm just not making good use of my own knowledge, my own body, my own life, I'm also not loving myself. Or if I help everyone else but I bash myself, or I mistreat my own self, also not good. So there's the idea to me, when it's asking about a practical ways to think about the law of adoration. So let's pray to God, let's do all the God's work, let's do what Jesus told us, loving ourselves, loving our gods, loving our neighbor. So having this sort of balanced attitude, not just going too much one way or the other. Because even in the past, if we think about hundreds of years ago, what were the Crusades if not this love that was too much on one side for God, when we would kill other people that didn't believe in our God, because we love our God so much, everybody has to love it the same way. So whenever there's an imbalance in one way or the other, we find ourselves in trouble, and then we have to expiate.
Good to know. From the United States Spiritist Federation, how can a person with mental struggles work on their purification?
By mental struggles, I'm trying to think here. So So the tougher their mental situation, so I'm thinking mental diagnosis because that's obviously my profession. But depending on the mental diagnosis, it's going to be very hard for them to understand and to comprehend and to actually apply these things. But the idea, let's think of mental struggles in a more, I guess, generalized way. We can still, the person with mental struggles can still work on that purification by trying to understand and practice these things that I mentioned already. So the resignation in face of pain, understanding, that I can always do better, I can always be better, I don't need, we all need the gold still, but we don't revolt against them. Sometimes the mental struggles can also be golds, can also be things that are telling us, look, you're going in the wrong direction, you're suffering right now from this, you're being from this affliction, this mental affliction, because you're not paying attention to the things you need to be pay attention to. Maybe some things you said you're going to do before you reincarnate, or maybe things you're doing wrong right now. So the mental struggle can come to sort of bring us back to the road that we must travel.
Thank you. That's very helpful to know. Truly. From the U.S. Spiritist Federation, how can we know during our earthly life our level of deprivation?
Wouldn't it be nice to know? I don't know. I think honestly, I don't think we can truly precise that, because even the spirit said that there's like an unlimited type, like orders and classes and things like that. So there's this idea that we can truly know. I'm a very curious person. I'd love to know some things, but obviously I don't think we can. And honestly, if we spend too much time focusing on that, we're gonna waste precious time thinking of something else. So the idea is, I don't think we can truly know, but we can have an idea, and I'll give that. We can have an idea based on where we are, with whom we are, and how we are. And we're gonna have an idea where, what sort of order or class, and what sort of we know the planet we're in. So we have an idea there that we're not. I'll just give it this: we're not very close to the end there with the purified water.
Understood. Thank you. And from TPCI, International Spiritist Council, what can we learn and how can we progress with the apparent chaos we are living in the present times?
We can learn from all types of experiences, the good and the bad. And as I talked, even in one of the slides mentioning that sometimes destruction may seem like it's the end to everything, but it's just a process of transformation. So having that knowledge, applying that with patience, with charity, and understanding that we can be the light of the world, as Jesus has said, especially in these times of crisis. Because Jesus said, I didn't come for I came for the sick, I came for the afflicted, I came for all of those. So if we have this knowledge already of the immortality of the soul, of the different reincarnations, we have this understanding of a fair and loving God. We know that these things that happen in all this chaos that happens is due to humanity's own doing, but we can be the difference. Be the change you wish to see in the world. That's my favorite quote of all time. So we can be the change. So that's how we can sort of act in the situation.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very, very much, Yuri. And many thanks to everyone who watched today's Talk Live and those who have been following our weekly Spiritist Talk series. Please don't mix our next live next Saturday, August 16th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, when Aniso Hizen will be discussing mediumship as a healing tool. So, Yuri, before we close the live, would you please offer a prayer?
Yes, of course. So for those who can, and those who are willing to, let's close our eyes. Let's sit comfortably. Let's take some deep breaths. Let us elevate our thoughts to God, our Father. Let us elevate our thoughts to Jesus, our Master, our brother, our friend. Let us elevate our thoughts to all the high spirits, all the benefactors that help us with everything that we go through. Let us send a prayer. Let us send a thought of gratitude to those who walk with us, who walk along us. Let us thank all the opportunities we receive with our heart full of gratitude and look forward to making the difference. And so be it.